From RedZone Weather in Bruton, Alabama, with meteorologist Spinks Meganson. A tropical weather update starts right now.
Tropical Storm Ian becoming better organized in the central Caribbean Sea on this Saturday evening. Ian is moving west right now, but the storm is likely to turn more to the north over the next few days. Hope you and your family are having a nice Saturday evening. We've got a tropical storm in the central Caribbean Sea. This is not Hermine, this is Ian. Hermine happened in the eastern Atlantic Ocean. This is Tropical Storm Ian. And so Ian is centered right now south of Jamaica, and it's forecast to ultimately move more to the north, perhaps somewhere near the eastern part of the Yucatan Peninsula or western Cuba in the days ahead. Lots of uncertainty in the long range here of where the storm will ultimately end up. We've got all the details on that, and we're going to get into the nerd talk and look at some of the features that may ultimately drive this hurricane in the next few days in terms of ultimately determining where the thing goes. So let's get into it. Right now I want to give you the latest information from the National Hurricane Center, the official source of information concerning hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin. Right now 14.6 north, 77.1 west. That is south of Jamaica in the Caribbean Sea. The system continues to move to the west at 14 miles per hour, and the minimum central pressure is down to 1,002 millibars as of the 8 p.m. Eastern Time advisory. Max winds up to 45 miles per hour. Earlier today, we had a recon jet in the system, a recon plane that is, a Hurricane Hunter aircraft, and I want to shift the perspective and show you the high-res satellite imagery here, because the center of circulation is somewhere under this mid-level spin. Right in through there, you can kind of get some semblance of the spin that is starting down here in the central Caribbean Sea. Again, just to get your geographical bearings straight, here's Honduras. This is the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. Belize is here. Cozumel is here. This is Cuba. And so the center of Ian is likely to move to the west over the next 24 hours before making more of a northwesterly jog as we get into the later part of Sunday. And then by the time we get into tomorrow night, Ian will probably be a hurricane and potentially even a major hurricane as soon as Monday, as the general northwesterly trend continues. And so right now we do have a hurricane warning up for Grand Cayman and also a tropical storm watch for some of the Cayman Islands as well. The tropical storm watch in Jamaica has been discontinued. I expect hurricane watches will be needed for parts of Cuba and maybe even parts of the Yucatan Peninsula as we get into your Sunday. Let me mention as well, impacts will extend beyond the cone of uncertainty. This cone is great. It's from the National Hurricane Center, but it gives us an idea of where the center of the storm will be. And keep in mind, it probably won't be down this clean-cut, neat line that we see in the middle of the cone. There will be some wobbles and shifts going on over the next few days, and we very well could see some forecast changes in the long term, meaning 4 to 5 days from now. And so watching this system very carefully as it develops down here in the Caribbean and ultimately lifts out to the northwest in the days ahead. By the time we get to the middle part of next week, just to get your bearings straight again, this is your point for Tuesday, this one's Wednesday, and that's Thursday. And keep in mind, look at the cone, don't look at that middle line. The cone of uncertainty for a potential landfall point extends from Pensacola on the west side all the way back over to Naples down here in the Florida Peninsula. And so what that means is right now, the National Hurricane Center suggests that the landfall point for Ian is likely to be somewhere along this stretch of coastline in the state of Florida. Wouldn't be shocked to see this cone shift somewhat again. And so over the next few days, we're going to really have to watch where the center of Ian goes, because we may see a shift back to the east, we may see a shift back to the west. That could mean that our local area in South Alabama and Northwest Florida would come under the gun potentially for some higher impacts. Right now, under the current guidance from the Hurricane Center, the current forecast, this basically has the storm moving just like this toward the Big Bend region, and that would largely largely limit or potentially hinder all local impacts on land areas. We would have high waves and rip currents closer to the immediate coast near the Alabama and Northwest Florida beaches. But on this trajectory, the major impacts would miss our local area here in Southwest Alabama and Northwest Florida off to the east. And keep in mind, as is always the case with a tropical system, the east is the beast and the west is the best. So if you have to deal with a hurricane, you want to be on that better west side. At the moment, that's what we're looking at. We would be on the western side if the current track holds. We'll see how it develops over the next few days. Now, let's get in there and kind of nerd out for a minute and talk about some of the steering features for this tropical storm as it is now, probably going to become a hurricane. Ian would be right there. That big blob is Ian. And this loop basically runs from Sunday to Wednesday. This is basically a jet stream, an area at about 18,000 feet at the 500 millibar height. And this trough is basically going to help call this hurricane to the north and northeast. There's actually two other features that you can't see on this specific map. You got an area of high pressure back here over the southern Great Plains, over Oklahoma and Texas, pushing air to the south because air around an area of high pressure rotates clockwise. In a hurricane, it obviously rotates counterclockwise. Another high pressure area happening in the southern Atlantic, south of Bermuda. And so those are going to be the three features: high pressure here, and a trough up here that's ultimately going to help dictate where this storm ends up in 5 to 6 days from now, basically, as Ian threatens part of the eastern Gulf Coast. Right now, it looks like that landfall point going to happen in the state of Florida, most likely somewhere between Pensacola and Naples. We will see what happens in future forecast updates. I suspect that there will be some changes. As we've been advertising over the last few days, the forecast is not set in stone just yet. The trends have been good for Alabama and Northwest Florida so far. We'll see if those trends continue. Now, let's talk about this, because this has been a recurring thing that has happened over the last few days. This graphic is from the National Hurricane Center. They're in Miami, Florida, and those scientists are the best in the world when it comes to tropical prediction. And so the Atlantic Basin covered by the National Hurricane Center, this is the current forecast that I just showed you in our fancy graphic system. Same thing, just looking at the data in a little bit of a different way. But I want to show you a model. And a model is just one ingredient in the recipe of a forecast. This is a spaghetti plot, as it's known across the internet. Here's another one. Let's look at a different one. That one is actually from today. And so it's one idea. It's one ingredient in a recipe. Here's my issue with spaghetti plots. And some of you that have been with us, a long time on RedZone Weather know what I'm about to say. Passing this type of stuff off as a completed forecast is basically the same thing as one ingredient in a recipe. I never dreamed in my wildest dreams that I would be showing an egg here on the air to help folks understand about these models, but indeed, it's a good analogy. So if you're making brownies, let's say you're making brownies, what's one ingredient? An egg. That's like this. This is the model output from a popular website, tropicaltidbits.com. You can see all the raw model guidance there, but it's one ingredient in a recipe of a forecast. Now, if you're making brownies, you obviously have other ingredients. Here's another model suite, and here's another ingredient, brownie mix, really good brownie mix, I might add. But this is not a brownie. Same thing with this. This is not a brownie, this is an egg. So when you're looking at different models, you're simply looking at ingredients, not the same thing as the finished product. In other words, here's a pan of brownies. I really didn't have time to make brownies this afternoon to show on the air, but if I did have brownies in here, they'd be in here and it would be the completed product. And that's what you see here. The scientists at the Hurricane Center put in hours and hours and hours. They have a ton of experience when looking at all these models, and basically they combine these models with what they know about climatology, meteorology, and their personal knowledge to generate this wonderful cone of uncertainty. And I would just caution, over the next few days, you're going to see a ton of mess like this. These things go back and forth, wildly varying over the course of just several hours. And so I would encourage you, stick with the National Hurricane Center. These folks know what they're doing. They're the best in the world. They are who I use, all right? And they're who you should use as well. Same thing with our local National Weather Service. They consult with the folks in Miami at the Hurricane Center that produce this data. And so stick with the cone of uncertainty. I would just encourage you, leave the spaghetti alone, all right? One ingredient in the forecast. We're looking at the finished product here of the forecast. Now, the product can change over time, as we all know, but it's better to look at the finished product as opposed to these nasty model output images. So, Tropical Storm Ian, currently situated in the central Caribbean Sea on this Saturday, gaining strength, max winds up to 45 miles per hour. As the system continues to move to the west at about 14 or 15 miles per hour, going to turn to the north most likely over the next few days. Low confidence in the forecast in this range at this moment as of, almost 8:30 on this Saturday evening. Impacts in South Alabama and Northwest Florida would be limited if the current scenario plays out. We all know that things can and will change, so be sure to check back in for updates over the next few days. I'll have plenty more updates coming in the RedZone Weather app in the hours ahead and, of course, in the days ahead. And if you have specific questions, shoot me an email, an inbox message, or even a comment below, and I'll try to get to those in just a little bit. I do hope you have a wonderful Saturday evening. We'll continue to monitor Ian and bring you the very latest over the next few days.
Be sure to find us across social media, and don't forget to download the free RedZone Weather app and set up your customized alerts. Please support our RedZone Weather sponsors who make our coverage possible every single day.